Hey everyone, welcome to my pedalboard run through. It is January of 2020. I recorded this video a couple months ago and I had some bad audio, so I just decided to start from scratch and do it over. And I took a couple notes to try to make this more efficient and not waste your guys' time. So what I'll do is I'll go through each pedal, how I use the sounds, the pros and cons of the pedal, and what my future plans are for if I plan on replacing anything or upgrading or changing anything. So just to kind of give you guys an idea of a useful board, not just, you know, funny noises and makes funny videos or good sounds or whatever, but I actually use these in live context and recording, and I just try to keep it as real as possible, like stuff that I'm actually going to use and stuff that I can recommend to you guys to use for yourself. So let's go ahead and jump into the board. Today I'm going to be demoing this pedal board with a Warwick Streamer LX5 string. This is my main bass. It has DR high beam strings on it that are pretty well worn in and don't really quite have that zing that you would with new strings for a solo purpose like this, but in a mix it really does add a little bit of growl and fatness to it. So it's kind of where I like my strings to sit. But anyways, let's hear how the dry bass sounds. Right now all the pedals are off, and the only thing that's coloring the sound at the moment is the Shiftline Olympic preamp, and that I'll talk more about at the end of the video, but for now just know that that's coloring the sound just a little bit as far as EQ and tube DI. But I'll go through the effects first and then get into that after. First up we have the Boss Octaver, the OC2. This is a classic pedal. I've had this for a while now. Pretty sure on my last video that I did of my pedal board I had this same exact pedal, or I sold it and bought one back, but this is the made in Japan version. I didn't really see a difference between any of the ones that I've had, but because it's an old one and it's well worn and it works for me, this is what I've been using. You'll notice that it has the red power plug, and that's to remind me that it's a 12 volt plug, and pretty much all the other pedals, I think everyone except the DI, are 9 volts. So this is just to remind me that these need 12 volt, even though they say 9 volt. These older ones, certain ones needed 12 volts to actually work properly, give you more headroom with less clipping and all that stuff. So let's go ahead and hear how this sounds with and without the effect engaged. Next up I have the Mantic Hulk. This is similar to the DoD Meatbox in that it's a sub-octave generator or sub-synth generator, and it takes the controls of the Meatbox and the two sub and low controls, cranks them, and just has the two left for octave and volume basically. And what I'll use this for is to make a chorus of a song bigger, or a bridge of a song bigger, or just any part that just needs a little bit of fatness. Use it in conjunction with a fuzz to give it a lot of beef of the low end with the buzziness of the high end. I don't have a fuzz on my board at the moment because I'm not using one, but for some recordings I have used this with a fuzz and it sounds really killer. So let's go ahead and hear how this sounds with and without the effect. So you can hear it gives a really fat sound to the low end. If you don't have proper speakers, you might not hear the full intensity of it, but it takes away from the basic bass sound of your bass guitar and then turns that into a sub-synth type sound that gets really, really deep and will rock your headphones or your subs or whatever you had. So be careful with this pedal if you choose to get one. I do recommend this over the DoD Meatbox for plenty of reasons, but if you want to see the full demo, I'll put a card up in the top right and you can click that and check out the comparison of this versus the DoD Meatbox. Next up we have the Shiftline Buzz. This is a distortion pedal, overdrive pedal, and I really like this for low gain and a little bit of more of an ampy type distortion. It has separate clean and dry drive controls, so you can pretty much balance your clean tone with your drive and have the clean tone stay the same and then add the drive in to however much you need. And this is set to a really low gain, as you can see, just for a low gain drive. I'll use this alongside the Dark Glass B3K. And this one at the moment is set to a high gain, even though it's set to a low mix, so it doesn't have a lot of the distortion in the mix, it still has the high gain. And that's just so I can have two different overdrives that I can use at any given time. So if some song needs low drive or high drive or both, I can kind of mix and match these as I need. Sometimes I'll switch this one out with a fuzz if a set needs a fuzz or anything like that, but just because it's up here and it's easy to get to, this one will be my rotator pedal. But the only fuzz that I really use right now is the dark glass duality. So either way, this is a dark glass slot and sometimes it rotates. But let's go ahead and hear how these two drives sound with and without each other and with and without being on at all. Next in the line is the Ernie Ball VP Junior. I could go for hours and talk about this thing and that it's good and it's bad and whatever, but I've tried a lot of volume pedals the last couple of years trying to figure out which one to replace this because of the whole string breaking issue and the fact that it's really hard to maintenance when it gets scratchy, when the volume pot gets scratchy, because the pot on the inside isn't really reachable by electronics cleaner spray. So you kind of have to take it all apart and mess with it just to get to it. But anyways, in my experience and what I've learned is that this really is a pretty bare bones volume pedal, and that's kind of all you need. And all the other ones kind of have their quirks and are still hard to maintain and whatever else, but I still use this and I just carry around the extra string kit with me just in case it breaks. But I think it's just one of those things that if it works, it just works, and that's about it. But as far as overall score for maintenance and usability and sound and everything, I think it's really hard to beat this pedal. Next in the chain is the Source Audio Spectrum Intelligent Filter. For a while I had the Moog low pass filter, and it took up pretty much this whole half of the board, and the power supply was weird, and I had to have an LS2 looper pedal to put it in its own loop because the bypass on it still went through the drive of the pedal, and I really didn't like that for my dry sound. So getting rid of that was really hard because that was my favorite filter sound. The sound was just insanely good and insanely organic and wet, and it just was super cool. But when I got the Spectrum filter, that was the one thing that I really wanted it to replace and really nail, and it just blew it out of the park. And just to add that it's a smaller form factor, it's a 9-volt supply, the bypass is great, and it just has a ton of other options to it. It just was a no-brainer to me to replace the Moog with this one. So I'll let you hear how the setting is that I have on there right now. Now we go to the delay and reverb pedals, which is the Eventide Rose and the Strymon Blue Sky. First, to talk about the Rose, this is a modulated delay pedal. Originally, I had an Avalanche run and many pedals before that, but that had dual reverb and delay built in just for simplicity, because usually when I was using one, I was using the other as well for swells and different things like that. But I've noticed that I really like the fine tuning of having both separately, and plus the Strymon has 2 presets that I can use. So it really does give me a few different options between these 3 sort of sounds that I can find something that I like. Talking about the Rose specifically, I use this more for a volume swell when I need it really big and full, and I'm not really doing so much attack because that would just give it a lot of mud. But putting the sine wave on slow, which you can see the wave or the modulation speed kind of go with the Rose light, which is pretty cool. And then it has the tap tempo down here, which is really neat as well, which you can program this to be almost whatever you want. It could be an A/B switch, it could be tap tempo, it could be reverse. There's a kind of a few things, and I forget what they all are, but it is really a powerful pedal that you can program to kind of whatever you need. Right now I'm just using it for tap tempo, you know, song to song speed changes, and I kind of want it to match at least a little bit, so that's where I have it set. So let's go ahead and hear how that sounds. So you can hear how that one just sounds really nice and full. I have the mix pretty well even, so when I fade in and out with my bass, usually with the volume pedal, but for the sake of this demo, I'm having to use my hand. When I roll it in and out, you don't really hear that the bass is fading out and the delay's taking over, so it kind of gives it a really nice thick pad sound. And most of the time I'll use these together. Sometimes I'll use this by itself. It just depends on the situation. But when I want to give it a little bit more something, I'll kick on the big sky, or blue sky, I'm sorry. And then that will sound like this. Also with the Strymon, it has the favorite switch, which I use to have a little bit more of the clean tone come through and a little less of the reverb, and kind of thins out the reverb a little bit. So if I'm ever doing a lead line type thing, it doesn't get super muddy, but it still gives it some chime. So we'll hear how that one sounds without, so you can hear the dry bass again. So that was the pedals by themselves. Let's go ahead and show you a little bit of, let's say, the drive together and some delay and reverb together, and we'll hear how that sounds. So that's it for the pedals on my board. As far as like major effects, I also have the Polytune 2 here just for the big display. I don't use the multi-tune feature or anything like that. I just like the big LED screen so I can see the tuning that I'm in and all that. It's strung with 3 Monkeys solderless, which that's kind of a long story, and you can see remnants of the lava tightropes that I've had. I only trust that now for my tuner because I don't care how it sounds. Every single one of these lava tightropes that I've had, and I've had a board even with more pedals complete with lava tightropes, just one by one, it seemed like every week or every month one would fail and I'd have to replace it or redo the cable. And I followed all the steps that they recommend you do, and very, very careful precision cutting and measuring and everything like that, and still would have them fail. So I don't have those anymore, but these 3 Monkeys were super easy to make. You literally just cut them and twist them, and that's it. Like, there wasn't anything to them, and they weren't super picky. And I've had these, I think I've had the first ones for about 1.5 years now, and they still haven't failed. And so every once in a while I'll get another batch and replace more and more. But I think I'm complete now, and I have a couple extras, so if I need to add to my board, I'm good with those. Underneath the board, I have the Strymon Zuma power supply. I really like this power supply. It's super quiet, super clean. There's really not much to say about a power supply. I was using the MXR Isobrick before, and that was a great power supply as well. There really wasn't a reason to change over, except that I had the money and wanted to kind of replace my power supply before anything did happen, and just wear and tear on the adapter and cables and everything. But I just wanted to go with this one and see how it was and make sure that it was something that I could recommend. But for the price point, it's a little bit more expensive than a standard power supply, but I think that pays off in a quiet board and just being able to trust that that thing's going to work no matter what. So finally, at the end of my board, I have the Shiftline Olympic preamp and DI. I think it's the MK3S. I think this is the newest one that I've heard. I know that they're working on another one, which I won't say anything about, but this one is the only preamp DI amp simulator, whatever you want to call it, that actually sounds like it has some real tube breakup, because it does have a tube inside, but it sounds more of that Ampeg, really pushed amp kind of sound. The way I'm using it today in most cases is really low gain, as you can see here, and then the volume just however volume. And I'll actually use the 1/4 inch out into an RNDI, because I like the way the RNDI really warms up your sound and really gives you some richness. Not to say that this doesn't, but this in conjunction with that sounds really, really good. And so that's why I use both. Sometimes I'll run the clean out here just to have a clean sound, and then use that into an RNDI, and then use the DI on this and have the cab sim and whatever. Because with this setup, I won't be able to use the cab sim feature, but it already colors the sound enough that I feel like, for me personally, I don't need it. So that's just the way that I'm using it right now. And then really the feature that I like the most is the high switch, where it gives you some zing in your high end, whether you're using new strings or old strings. It just kind of gives you that, like a horn on a speaker cabinet, just that real nice zing to it. So that's one of my favorite things to use. And then it has the cab sim, and it has a master for the DI and gain options. So let me just show you how I'm using it now, and then show you a couple of the options that it has, in case you're curious about it. So this is, let's turn all these pedals off first. I think everything's off. Okay, and now we'll just do how I have it, which is, as you see on there, not very, not coloring the sound too much, except for that high switch is really adding some bit to the high end, and I'll show you that without it too. So you can hear that that high switch really adds a little bit of zing to it. So now let's cut this back a little bit, and we'll bump up the gain so you can hear a little bit more of the tube breakup that it has. Let's bump it up even more. Let's cut this down because it gets really loud. And let's go ahead and crank it all the way up just for funsies, because we're here and we can do it. That's basically it. There's really not much else that I use. I have a wall of effects that I'll rotate in and out here and there, but for the most part, this is kind of the setup that I really like sticking with. I've become less and less of a fan of rotating certain pedals in and out, except for, like I mentioned, this little spot here, just because it starts to become a pain with power supply placement and cable management, and really trying to maintain a clean board is hard to do when you're constantly switching in and out things. But since I do get a lot of pedals all the time, it's kind of hard not to want to do that. But anyways, this is kind of the bare bones setup that I always use and that I've been using. And you may notice that there's a lot of extra boards. So this kind of segues into my future plans, which is getting a little bit of a smaller board. I've been thinking about going to the Temple boards because I've heard a lot of great things about them, and I really like the clean look that they have. And I just noticed, I don't know why I didn't notice because I don't follow it, that they now have the black boards with the red sides, which to me is really cool. That's just like my two favorite colors, so it makes sense to try to want to do something like that. So I think Temple boards will be in my future. getting this mounted to the Zuma with a parallel adapter, because right now it's plugged in with a AC adapter, a separate wall wart, which I have to hook up separately, and it's kind of getting a pain. So I want to mount this and then get some sort of cable management system, inputs and outputs on the side, so I can show up and not have to use the output of my OC2, which is probably going to go bad at some point, which so far it's held up. And then, yeah, the DI and the Strymon kind of get the other end of getting the 1/4 inches out that way. But that's pretty much it for my future plans. I'm kind of happy with this setup. As far as a bass player goes, there's really not much else you can do besides, you know, synth stuff or funky stuff, but I don't do a terrible amount of that stuff anymore, so it's kind of evolved into something like this where it's a little bit more simple, and I'm more focused on my clean tone and really how pure stuff sounds, and then adding stuff on top of that. So that's kind of my goal with this board. Anyways, I've been ranting on for far too long. You guys get the idea of this board and what it can do. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys like this video, hit the like button and subscribe if you want to see more like this. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section below. If you guys want to follow me on Instagram, I do post a lot of stories and different things on there that I don't get to post on YouTube, even though YouTube does have the stories now. But there you'll see a lot of behind the scenes and a lot more of my personal life and just different things that you won't see. Not a well-polished video. You just see stuff as I'm working or as I'm doing things. I try to post stuff there, and I've really been making a push to really hype up my Instagram more so than the YouTube, just based on things. But that's stuff I'll talk about in another video as well. So anyway, see you guys later. Thanks for watching.